Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on recycling practices for property and facility managers. Thanks so much for attending our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping items. Everyone's microphones have been muted to prevent any background noise. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type them in the question or chat field, and I'll be sure to get to them at the end of the webinar today. Also, we're going to be recording the webinar, so you will be getting an email following today's session with a link to that recording. Just bear with me here. I'm just trying to transition these slides. There we go. So I thought a good way to start today's webinar would be to talk about our ecological footprint as a way to highlight the importance of recycling. So an ecological footprint is used to measure the pressure for resources that we put on our planet. So currently Canada's ecological footprint is 8.5. So this basically means that we would need 8.5 global hectares per person to sustain our current lifestyles. Ideally, it should be 1.8. So we measure ecological footprints to ensure that we're only using as many resources as the earth can sustainably provide us with. So you might be asking, how does this relate to recycling? Well, reducing and reusing is one of the easiest ways that we can reduce landfill space and also conserve natural resources. So this is where we're going to put our focus and our attention on today. So property and facility managers have a really important role towards increasing the volume of recycled materials that are recovered in communities. And management expectations of facilities are constantly changing. So facility managers cannot rest easy knowing that projects are running on time and on budget. There's so much more to it than just that. So how property managers measure success over time has really shifted. Now we're seeing upper management wanting to know how much of a return they're seeing on their facility investments instead of just customer satisfaction and how much money is being saved. So today we're going to address how recycling can be used to help with some of the difficulties that property managers face. And some of the biggest barriers include things like lack of infrastructure, high tenant turnover rates, language and cultural barriers, and continuing education for tenants that have different degrees of understanding of sustainability items. So hopefully by the end of the webinar today, you will have seen and learned some valuable information in regards to how recycling can be of benefit to both you, your tenants, and your buildings. So an early stage when planning for a recycling program is to identify and evaluate your current program, if one even exists. So by assessing and understanding your current waste management practices, this really gives you the opportunity to uncover areas that can be improved or require change. So the main goal of your new recycling program is to reduce and reuse the waste. And waste avoidance really should be your top priority. So think about things like, how can you reduce the amount of materials you're generating? Recycling should only be used after reduction and reuse options have been considered. Disposal of waste in the landfill is only considered when all these other avenues on the screen have been exhausted. Working together with cleaners and building facilities staff helps to create a really clear collection schedule and process. So an area for consideration is if your current processes can be handled by existing facility staff or if an external contractor should be considered. Be sure to work out all details with contractors in regards to understanding what types of materials are considered contamination. And be clear on their flexibility in terms of collection frequency in case you come across situations where your waste levels are changing. It's also a good idea to request a report that outlines the amount of recyclables and appropriate contamination levels that they think are acceptable. And ensure that cleaning and repairing bins is also the responsibility of the contractor, and that there's also a written agreement for them to work respectfully alongside facility managers. Be sure to integrate your recycling plan into your current organizational policies. So we can think of some policies that might work against your sustainable efforts. So an example of this could be a records policy that requires hard copies of documents to be printed one-sided. So you would overcome this by speaking to appropriate departments on how those policies can be reviewed to help achieve sustainable objectives. And always be sure to run a pilot run with your containers. This helps to uncover any unforeseen problems and also makes the transition a success. So here's a list of some things to consider that your team will need to know. Things like the location of recycle bins, tips for reusing and reducing, misconceptions of contamination, what is accepted in the containers, the proper disposal of certain items like batteries, and also how they can provide feedback and manage expectations and also upcoming events. So communicating with your team. Communicating is really important, obviously, but it's important to be sure that it's not information overload. So making sure you're focusing on messaging in a positive sense and that not all communication is negative. Having a clear call to action is also really important. We find that people, for the most part, they want to participate properly and do the right thing. So it's important that they know what's expected of them so that they can behave accordingly. Door-to-door outreach has been proven a cost-effective method for increasing recycling participation, and being prepared by brainstorming possible excuses that you're likely to run into before advising people of the program, and trying to remove as many of these barriers as possible and prepare answers for those barriers that you cannot remove. So a successful recycling program can save large amounts of money if the program is utilized properly. So by recycling, the amount of waste produced is minimized, and this results in reduction of disposal costs. So we have a success story here from Patrick Molly, who is a resource conservation specialist at the King County Housing Authority in Washington. And he actually collected financial statistics on multifamily apartment buildings. And he discovered that by having the correct implementation, size, and use for his recycling containers at an apartment complex in Washington, this allowed him to reduce his monthly waste collection bill from $4,800 down to $3,000. So this was a $21,000 savings per year. So this is a huge sum of money that can be used to benefit both the buildings and the tenants annually. So going on with this green building theme here, the U.S. Building Council estimated that green buildings save on average of $58 billion of sick time annually. And a separate study was done by the U.S. Green Council, and they estimated that worker productivity increased by $180 billion. This results in much happier, healthier, and more efficient employees and tenants. And recycling is really a great way to create a sense of community and to help build positive relationships between tenants, property managers, and buildings. So this is an example of our office building here. And then in the background there, you can see our living green wall, which is up close. Photo of that is here. So the U.S. Green Building Council reported some green building statistics, and these included things like a 30 to 50% reduction in energy use, a 35% reduction in carbon emissions, 40% reduced water use, and 70% solid waste reduction. So I hosted an interview with a local property manager here in Ontario. Her name is Kathleen Walsh, and she manages several different buildings here in our area. So we touched on some of her successes with implementing recycling into her properties. So we're going to play that interview now. Okay, so thanks, Kathleen, for taking the time today to answer some of these questions. So first off, can you tell us who is Cora Group and what is your position with them?
Sure. Hello, and thank you also for inviting me to speak with you about recycling. And I think it's really timely because this is the 35th anniversary of the introduction of the Blue Box. So the whole idea of recycling, it's a big anniversary year for them, and it's kind of appropriate. So my name is Kathleen Walsh, and I'm a property manager with the Core Group. Core is a developer and manager of commercial real estate primarily. I manage three 100,000 square foot office buildings, as well as 7 other properties that are mixed retail, residential, and commercial.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So we know that you have a recycling program that's already implemented into your building. So how do you educate your facility managers and your tenants to properly use that program?
Yeah, we have recycling and waste, but we also have composting in the buildings. So it's even got an extra prong for us to have to educate people. And for me, the easiest way is to meet with the facility managers in each of the various offices and review our requirements. I also run a waste education week once a year. And I also find that having really extensive labeling on all waste centers helps clarify and remind people what they're supposed to do.
Awesome. Perfect. So you mentioned just there that you've started to collect your organics. So with that, have you seen an increase in your diversion rates?
Yes, we've definitely diverted from waste to the compost bins. We're not necessarily saving money, but it's definitely supporting our commitment to sustainability.
Great. And what are some of the common challenges that you can share um, that you find that you have when it comes to recycling in your buildings?
The main issues we have are with janitorial staff who occasionally mix the waste and recycling or dispose of it in the wrong bins.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a
That
common problem.
is
Um,
it.
and do you save any money with your recycling program?
Yes. Well, we switched to centralized waste centers, which effectively removed the waste bins from all of the desks, so from 400 desks plus per building. And the result was 4,000 less plastic bags going into landfill annually out of each one of the buildings. So there's a financial savings there, definitely, but the bigger savings is the janitorial savings cost because it's about 15 to 20% less hours required from janitorial cleaning to clean the building because they're not having to stop at each desk and take that time to empty the
Hmm.
bag. So the combined with the combined with the not having to buy the plastic bags anymore and the janitorial time savings, it's substantial.
Hmm. Yeah, that's huge.
Mm-hmm, it is.
Um, do you find that your tenants care about your building's recycling efforts?
I'm guessing that about 40% really care.
Hmm.
And then a lot of people toe the line because of peer pressure.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
what I find. Yeah.
that's what we find here at our building as well. Do your tenants produce items that are not accepted by your hauler? And if so, how do you dispose of these items?
Well, once a year, we have an e-waste company put a bin in the lobby for a week, and we put lots of notice out. We collect from all the businesses, but more importantly, people bring stuff from their homes, and we actually have a competition between the buildings because these buildings are in close proximity to each other, and see who can fill their bins. You know, to the most full, like that spilled over and filled the lobby with all of the e-waste that we can collect. We also have pails out for batteries that so we make sure that we bring it in from a lot of different sources, the businesses and all of the employees. I think they even must go out to their families because they save this stuff, and it's quite an e-waste drive we run once a year.
Hmm. That's awesome, getting everybody
Hmm.
involved.
Yeah, it's a bit of a it's actually a bit of fun. Everybody's taking pictures and there's stuff everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And above and beyond recycling, what other sustainable efforts does Core Group participate in?
Well, Core has built and operated 2 LEED Gold buildings, and we now have 1 LEED Platinum building, and all of that's in the past 10 years. Our most recent development has already won awards for being the first net zero building in Canada, and we really believe it's going to end up achieving a net positive. So that means it's going to create more energy than it can possibly consume, even in like the heat of midsummer, fully occupied. We're still going to
Wow.
be generating more energy than the building can consume. So that's in terms of energy. We're very forward thinking. We also
Mhm.
have cisterns for all of the toilet water. We have EV chargers, um, of course, solar generation, geothermal heating and cooling. We only use green cleaning products. All of our plant material on site is native material. Of course, no pesticides. All operations within the building must um, adhere to sustainable and green procedures.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's great. Quite the list.
It is. It
Yeah,
is.
that's awesome. And then finally, do you have any successful tips when it comes to recycling to offer the rest of the audience?
Well, it was really difficult to bring our tenants, all their employees on board, but centralized waste centers have really streamlined our waste sorting. People are far more conscious about separating when it's really easily defined in a centralized waste center, and they're more accountable to their peers when they're standing up there at in public view of everybody, and
Hmm.
they actually really like it. They've really taken to it. Um, for me to get the management to come on board, it was about saving them money. I could say
Hmm.
your janitorial costs are going to go down. This is what's going to happen. So dealing with upper management, it's always about the cost. But then actually getting that to be realized amongst the employees, it seemed to be peer pressure, and my challenge is getting people to care about doing the right thing.
Hmm.
And I'm always working on that. I'm trying to find ways to get people to be involved and care about all sustainable efforts.
Hmm.
But
Yes,
I
that's
think that peer pressure and just making it visible, um, and then once a year, the other way I get people really involved in this is we it's we run a whole week just on waste, and we I open up one of the garbage bags in the lobby on top of a big tarp, and
hmm.
we just see, how well did we do this year. I only do it once a year. How do we do this year over last year? How much of this shouldn't be in the waste stream? And then I also do a litterless lunch day, and people send in their pictures, and they all get a gift card, and or else a draw for a gift card, depending on how many people enter. Sometimes
Hmm.
we only get 3 or 4 per building, but if I get a lot, then we do a draw. So annually, trying to ramp it up and come up with new ideas to get people to care
Hmm.
about recycling.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you guys are doing an awesome job over there, and that's really great info and suggestions that you had for the audience today. So, thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing your success with Core Group and all of the great things that you're doing. We really appreciate your time today.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so Kathleen did such a great job highlighting some of the benefits that she's seen across her several properties by implementing recycling. So I want to stay on track with this topic and talk about the return on investment and how this relates to building reputation. So companies that put eco back in economy are boosting their corporate image, and some of the most positive and reputable companies around are doing just that. So as upcoming generations transition to becoming consumers and workers, they are the ones that are supporting sustainable companies and that are positively contributing to the environment. So organizations that are not in the loop with green practices really need to catch up, as their businesses will eventually suffer. So there was a study that was conducted by the associate professor of apparel management at the University of Missouri, and she determined that consumers value 4 key areas of corporate sustainability. and they believe are the moral duty of companies to uphold. So these are the 4 key areas, and they include working conditions, environmental support activities, community development, and transparency. So as important as sustainability is, companies really need to find this balance of business and environmental initiatives. And recycling provides this opportunity that's very easily provable and tangible, and also provides a return on investment. So waste diversion is one of the most significant reporting indicators for companies that publish and share sustainability reports. Recycling is an essential green practice for these organizations and is necessary if a facility or property manager wants to receive recognition for their efforts. It's important to share success in reducing the amount of waste you're producing as a building or as a company, because waste is visible. And it's something that people can see for themselves, and they can also see the improvement. So diversion programs give this opportunity to engage visitors and occupants and also foster this sense of community. So up on the screen now, this is an example of an environmental board that Kathleen had actually designed for the lobby of her buildings. And this let visitors who came into her building know that clearly this building has a sustainable focus, and they had an established recycling program implemented. So you can share how much recycled material you've diverted from the landfill, or mention what your company has done to save the environment by engaging in these practices. Ensuring proper management and correct use of the recycling program provides a return on investment. So here are 3 critical factors that we're going to take a look at further that facility managers should be considering, and that includes education to tenants, infrastructure, and coordination of collection services. So we're going to take a look at this study as a way to stress the importance of education. So the EPA conducted this study on multifamily communities, and from their research, it was concluded that recycling rates at these types of communities rest at 14%. And most of the products that are actually placed in these streams are not recyclable. So facility and property managers play an imperative role in encouraging and educating recycling, and fulfilling this role is key to success. So we've gathered some applicable tips to use to educate tenants, and that includes assessing your current program, if one is in place, with the use of a waste audit, and finding out where your improvements can be made. So you can't manage what you're not measuring. So facility managers realize that consistent tracking of waste and recycling helps to better assess the amount of waste produced by the building. Putting together a green team for the organization with members from all different departments to ensure education is widespread throughout the building. The green team can be in charge of creating and implementing reduction activities and coordinating with the maintenance staff. So up on the screen here is actually our marketing team. We had a launch of the expansion of our recycling program. So this was just our team marketing it to the rest of our company. And preparing an announcement or a program kickoff, just like this example, by gathering your tenants and providing them with the education and a list of the goals, emphasizing the benefits so they can understand how to make a positive difference. And also taking the time to regularly revisit and maintain your recycling program, and engage and offer consistent communication. Give the opportunity for feedback from your tenants and listen to what it is that they have to say about the program. So understanding the amount as well as the types of waste and recycling that the building produces allows for a reduction in hauler fees. So it identifies the waste and recycling services that fit your personalized needs. When implementing a recycling program, start thinking about what materials your organization recycles. Ask questions like what materials are most common in our workspace, or what materials provide the greatest return. Some examples could include construction waste, scrap metal, printer cartridges, batteries, plastic films. When deciding to implement this recycling program, consider your collection system and also the markets and equipment that is available in your community for your building. Pick your partners wisely and choose reputable companies, and learn what it is that materials are accepted by your collection program and what can be done with these products that they're not accepting. So look into programs for proper disposal of batteries and toxic waste, and organizations that take items for reuse, like furniture and clothing. So by tracking your recycling rates, this gives you the hard data to be able to determine where recycling bins should be placed, the capacity that the container should be, as well as how many bins in total there needs to be. For a lot of tenants, it's all about convenience, so choosing spots for the bins that are close and really easily accessible. An example of this would be the dust side recycling containers in an office. So in a study that was done by Keep America Beautiful, they showed that office recycling and waste bin setup increased recycling by 20%, and it also reduced contamination levels at the bins. So there were 34 offices in Atlanta, Boston, Houston, and San Diego. And they partnered with Busch systems, and we provided dust side recyclers with a small hanging waste basket that's seen here in the photo. And in doing this, the recyclables increased from 65% to 85%. And the amount of recyclables in the trash container decreased from 30% to 13%. So the amount of office paper that was in the trash bin actually decreased to 0, which is quite an improvement that they saw. So I saved a PDF file with the highlights of this study in the handout section on the webinar, so that can be found in the right side toolbar under handouts. So you can download that there. So by having the recycling container next to the trash bin, it encourages tenants to recycle, and having this integration with recycling most likely results in the downsize of waste containers. So ensuring there's room for containers in your buildings, as well as larger containers outside if this is a requirement from your hauler. Oftentimes unused parking lots are an ideal spot for these larger bins. If you're worried about consistently having to repurchase containers, you can always consider adding a deposit for tenants into their contracts for the recycling bins. So 18% of US households live in multi-residential buildings. So this includes things like apartments, dorm rooms, condos, assisted living facilities. And in the year 2000, the diversion rate for these units was 18%. So fast forward to 2015, and this diversion rate increased to 37%. While at the same time, in the year 2015, diversion rate for single family units was 74%. So for residential properties, the 4 C's of infrastructure are important for success, and these include the first being color. So having distinctive colored differences for containers, like gray for trash and blue for recycling. The second is convenience, so having the recycling container directly beside the trash container. The third is clarity in terms of signage and informing residents of what goes where. And the fourth is capacity, so having equal capacity to the garbage container. So the recycling dumpster needs to be able to hold at least 20 gallons per unit per week. So if you've already implemented a recycling program, then that's a great first step. You may think that all of the hard work is done and you can wipe your hands clean, but unfortunately that's not the case. It's really important not to stop there, and sustaining your program is really important to ensure long-term success. So some helpful tips to help to maintain your program include keeping this recycling area clean. So this makes a nice experience for your residents or tenants or whoever's using the recycling stations. And make sure to address issues like faded signage or overflowing containers, graffiti. You can also get help from volunteers. So getting the support from motivated tenants or residents. And these volunteers can help to monitor containers and act as points of contact. And give the tenants the opportunity for feedback. Check in frequently with custodial and maintenance staff and respond positively to suggestions and comments. And this keeps key players in your program motivated and participating regularly. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about LEED certification. So I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with LEED, standing for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's a world-renowned green building rating system. So it uses a platform online, and it basically scores your sustainability practices of your buildings, homes, and communities. And the purpose of LEED is to offer education and inspire others to create healthy and cost-saving buildings. These buildings help to reduce energy use, water, greenhouse gas emissions. They often generate less waste and support human health overall. So the system is currently used in over 165 countries. More than 40% of these are actively happening internationally, and 2.4 million square feet of building is LEED certified each day. So there's different levels of certification, including certified silver, gold, and platinum. So basically, the reason for certifying with LEED is it gives a third-party verification. So it's beneficial to facility managers because it provides you with accountability and transparency to your customers and colleagues. It's recognized globally as a leading symbol of sustainability, so it gives any organization a competitive advantage. And green buildings we're seeing now are a lot more common for attracting tenants, such as those like in corporate, public, or individual buying. And upcoming generations are especially putting emphasis on the importance of sustainability. So LEED buildings provide a healthier work environment for employees, resulting in reduced sick days and also increased productivity and retention of workers. So the PNC Bank actually found that one of its LEED buildings increased employee satisfaction by 50% compared to their traditional facilities. Sorry, I keep jumping ahead. And they cost overall less to operate and run, which means that over the life cycle of the building, monies continue to be saved. So it's the building operations and maintenance rating system in LEED that relates to recycling and waste management. So its goal is basically to reduce the environmental harm of materials that are used within buildings. So some factors in the rating system include having a EPP, which is environmentally preferable purchasing policy, a lot of P's, for products in the building. So this includes paper, toner cartridges, binders, batteries, lamps. Points are also accredited for documenting waste audits and having extremely high diversion rates, greatest at 75% or higher. So property managers can educate tenants and employees on LEED practices by becoming a LEED professional, a LEED green associate, or a green classroom professional. So Green Globe certification is another program that is basically the international equivalent to LEED. So it uses an online assessment and rating system for building design and management. And it can be done in-house using a project manager and design team. So the submitted requirements for Green Globes consist of documents that are normally produced as part of a green construction project. So just wrapping up our webinar today, I wanted to touch briefly on one of our popular products with property managers just before we wrap up. So Busch Systems designed a container called the Evolve series. So this container was also on the opening slide at the beginning of the presentation. And it's super popular with facility managers, mainly because its name Evolve, basically it's named that because it evolves with your space. So it's great for foyers, large hallways, and meeting rooms. And there's also a canopy option for outdoor areas. The container is high capacity and it's also interchangeable. So as your streams change, so can the container. So if this is something that you're interested in, let me know and I'm happy to get you some more information on our Evolve series. Okay, so that wraps up our webinar today on recycling practices for property and facility managers. So thanks so much everyone for listening. I will be sticking around for another few minutes to respond to any questions. My contact info is up on the screen, so if you do have any comments or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And as I mentioned earlier, the webinar was recorded, so you will be getting an email with that link. And please feel free to share that recording with anyone that you think would find the information valuable. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.